So I'm feeling a little bit like Noah today. And the fact I'm doing carpentry work, maybe a little bit like Christ also. But we have a fence here that is chicken wire and fencing, and put a piece of plastic on it because the cats were able to climb. It's mostly to keep our cats inside. But it got stormy and blew the fence down a couple times, so the fence is really in bad shape right now. It was never really very attractive looking. It was kind of always, when I first put it up it was fine, you know, but it's kind of like this chain link fence. I'm not chain link, I guess it's chain link, right? It's in a chain and it's linked. But and then we had to put fence nets over, and then the older cats couldn't get out, so that was fine. But then they got some kittens and they escaped many times. So my wife saw on social media some people who made their porches into patios for the cats, and they called it a catio. So we're doing something I think looks a lot better. It's going to be a catio. But this reminds me of Noah building the ark, and he must have, it took him over 100 years to build the ark, and he must have lived in it even after the flood. He must have lived in there in the ark. It's like what a lot of people, sailors, they go and they take the ship apart and then, you know, live on land. But where the artifact is of Noah's Ark, there's not really houses or civilizations. There's the Ark, a couple of grave sites. One of them they believe is Noah and his wife, or two of them, I guess. Which the bones, I think, have been stolen, or who knows where they are by now. But the tombstone is still there with the rainbow on it. Anyway, so I think there's scientific fact about how the earth, it was perfect after God made it, right? So the earth was perfect. There was more water under the continents, under the ground. It had to be liquid water. And probably giant fish were in there. And then apparently it didn't rain. The plants were watered by water coming up from the ground. Some people say a mist, but I think it was probably like the tides. And I think there weren't any mountains before the flood, at least not as significant, because like the geographical layers clearly were at one point level, and then they got thrown apart by a catastrophic event, which is probably many catastrophic events occurred during the flood. I kind of think maybe partly it was the earth somewhat wandering away from the sun that changed part of why the atmosphere changed. I mean, I'm not trying to take any credit away from God. I'm just, you know, God created science and nature, so He spun up the atmosphere, so now we have the law of entropy. Everything is spinning apart and running down and burning out. So at some point our sun is going to go red giant and radically change our atmosphere and solar system. So people try to explain how, or scientists I should say, try to explain how under the oceans there clearly were forests, and continents are bigger than the amount of water that is in the oceans. So with like erosion and everything, it must have been what is it called? Must have been somehow less water on the surface of the earth. So they want to say there was an ice age, right? And that's where all the water was, the amount of water that we can't really count for on the surface must have all been frozen. Which, if there was a ice age, it would have been recorded somewhere in human record. And people say, well, millions and millions of years, humans weren't able to write and all that crap. But humans do tell stories and hand stories down, which in most cultures the stories agree. So, for me, it doesn't seem reasonable that there was an ice age. I think the Earth was perfect to start with. It had a ring around it that is called a canopy. People want to say there's a firmament, and the Earth has a dome or had a dome, which... problem with that is if the atmosphere is like, let's say like Neptune has mostly water in its atmosphere, it's a gas giant, right? And the mass inside of it is roughly the size of Earth. So maybe at one point Earth looked like Neptune. However, with that amount of moisture in the air, water in the atmosphere, you're not going to be able to see the stars and the sun and the moon, which after God changed the Earth atmosphere and started creating a livable environment on Earth, there was a point where he changed the atmosphere so you could see the suns and moon and stars. And there's also mention of a canopy. So canopy or vault. I think a rainbow is a good example of a canopy because it's a bow, but in reality if you fly up in the sky and you see a rainbow from above, it's a ring. It's a circle. So the canopy must have been a ring of moisture water around the Earth. Which, if we look at Saturn has the rings are ice. But the rings are just around the equator where, for the magnetic poles is just where the most of the water accumulates. It's actually around the entire planet. It's not just at the rings, it's just more dense around the rings. So on the same principle, when Earth was perfect, when Earth had more moisture and pressure on the surface and moisture and water in the atmosphere, which clouds we know are ice particles, right? So the ice particles would have been visible as a canopy or a ring, or some people want to say it had like a crystal dome. It's just, nah, man. Do we see that anywhere in other planetary bodies? It's nowhere in other planets. It's no ring of ice around the planet. There's rings. Well, not like it's a crystal ball. It's like Saturn. Also, Neptune has a ring, and is it Jupiter or is it Uranus? I forget. But we have like at least 3, maybe 4 planets in our solar system that have rings that are visible with our telescopes, and not telescopes, but our spacecraft we send out there. Anyway, so scientifically it makes sense that the Earth had a ring, and it was recorded before anyone would have scientifically calculated and figured out, Earth would have most likely had a ring. Well, that's what the Bible says. It had a canopy, so duh. But anyway, I don't think there was an ice age. I think after the flood, the atmosphere was radically different. We continued to drift a little bit away from the Earth, so it got cooler, and we had less atmosphere. So the water that was still in our atmosphere, a lot of it got trapped at the poles and froze. But under the surface there, under the ice, we see there was rivers and there was trees. So, this ice age doesn't really fit that it covered the whole planet. It does fit that moisture covered the whole planet, but not ice. I think maybe more ice will cover the Earth once we move further away from the sun. Probably when the sun goes red giant, these are just musings of, I don't know. There's a lot of science in the Bible that is recorded as historical events, or like in the Old Testament there's like medical science, like even Christ, he used spit and dirt to clean a guy's eyes out so he could see. So Christ used homeopathic medicine instead of like home remedy, instead of just a miracle. And a lot of the priests practiced types of medicine for different diseases. And the main one they did was quarantine people. So now we know that quarantining people was a really good idea for sick people. So anyway, 10-minute video, a lot longer than I wanted to do, but I don't think science really supports an ice age. If you really look at how the Earth has been moving through the solar system and how it developed, and the magnetosphere, and yeah, I think our next major catastrophe we need to prepare for is when the sun goes red giant, which they want to say billions and billions of years, but if they're wrong about how long the Earth has been here, then they're probably wrong about how long the sun is going to stay like it is. So humanity needs to prepare for a drastic change on Earth, whether it's digging under the Earth and living sheltered by the oceans and the Earth's surface, or being able to survive in further out in the solar system or in spacecraft.